This is Pet Life Radio. Let's talk pets.
Welcome to Covered in Pet Hair, a boozy web show for pet lovers on Pet Life Radio. I'm your host, Isabel Alvarez-Arata, and today I have the pleasure of having a drink and a chat with a dog trainer that considers himself an expert on the bitey end of the dog. I will tell you all about him and introduce you as soon as we come back from these messages from our sponsors.
Molly, here's your dinner. Zeus, that's not your food.
Don't let that happen to your precious cat. Elevate your cat's eating experience with the Cat Tree Tray. The Cat Tree Tray keeps your cat's food off the floor and conveniently located on the cat tree. It's the perfect way to eat. It's a beautiful wrought iron tray that easily attaches to your cat tree and keeps dogs and other critters out of your cat's dish. A must for multi-pet households. There's a 6-inch tray for large bowls and a 4-inch tray for smaller bowls. Purchase your Cat Tree Tray today. Go right now to cattreetray.com. That's cattreetray.com. cattreetray.com.
Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back to Covered in Pet Hair. I'm your host, Isabel Alvarez-Arata, and today I have the pleasure of having a drink and a chat with a pet parent, a behaviorist. He's a dog trainer and an entrepreneur. He's an adventure seeker, a road tripper, a foodie, and a wine snob. He loves his craft beer and his coffee. He's a world traveler, a fitness fanatic, partner to Moira, who's also a veterinarian and a specialist in separation anxiety. So we all know they're talking dogs at the dinner table. He's also dad to Cayenne, a high school human who I'm sure gives dad a run for his money. He is dog dad to Castaña, which means chestnut in Spanish. She is a Chilean street dog. And he is cat dad to Renardo, who's also from Chile. He is a Chilean street cat. My guest, is host of The Bitey End of the Dog, a podcast all about dog aggression. And he's the founder of AggressiveDog.com. He's the foremost canine aggression expert. And his name is Michael Shikashio. Welcome, Michael. It's so great to have you on the show.
I'm really excited to be here. And I got to say, that was the most enthusiastic introduction I've had in a long time. So thank you, Isabel.
Of course. I mean, look at all of this interesting facts about you. I love learning all these things about my guests.
Yeah, it's super exciting. As you were going through that, it made me think about how much I'm like Chris Pockle, Dr. Chris Pockle, who you had on the show a couple of months ago or a little while back. He's sort of like my brother from another mother. So.
Yes, I know. You guys are the dynamic duo. I love it. So Christopher Pockle, if you haven't seen his show, I'll put a link to it right here so that you can grab another drink and watch after this show. But actually, should I call you Mike or Michael?
That sounds good. Mike is easier to say, so we'll go with that.
All right, well, that's perfect. But before we go any further, I want to introduce our drinking game. So anybody participating in our drinking game tonight, anytime you hear this word,
the secret word is bite.
Make sure you take a drink of whatever it is you're enjoying, but please be 21 and over to enjoy in the U.S. And please never drink and drive. Always drink responsibly. So what are you drinking tonight, Mike?
I'm actually drinking Dogs and Boats, aptly named. It's this great IPA from a local company, Beard Brewing, which is local to Connecticut. And it's actually really good. They make all kinds of craft beers, but this one's like a double IPA. And I usually drink it in the summer, when I'm on a boat with my dog, aptly named.
Nice. So nice. A dog and a boat. That's the life. So I hear you're from Mystic, Connecticut, which is like this beautiful, quaint little touristy town. I have a friend who was just there last week. How did you end up in Mystic, Connecticut?
I'm originally from Rhode Island, and I kind of moved down south, if you want to call it that, about 30 miles. But it's a long way for a Rhode Islander to move that far. But Mystic is close to the casino, Foxwoods Casino, where I used to work. That was my previous career before I started working with dogs. So that's what kind of got me to move to Mystic. And here I am. I haven't moved away from Mystic yet, but looking for warmer weather.
Oh, nice. Now, so a move south is on the horizon. Well, I'm actually having a hot toddy today because as you can tell, I'm feeling a little sick. And of course, it's fall, winter, and the bugs are all around us. My kids are always bringing something home from school. So cheers to you. Thank you for being on the show and forgive my terrible, terrible sounding voice, but we're going to get through this.
You sound great. The radio voice is definitely still there.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. So I always start my show with a game. And I'm glad you told me to call you Mike because the name of the game is Mike Unmuzzled.
Love it. Let's do it.
Basically, I'm just going to ask about you. We're going to talk about muzzles, but we're going to talk about muzzles in the second part of the show. This is all about Mike. And I want to ask you questions, but you got to, just like I did for Dr. Chris Pockle, you got to give me quick answers on this one. Are we ready to play?
I'll do my best. Let's go.
Awesome. All right. How long have you been training professionally?
Ooh, almost 20 years.
How long have you specialized in aggressive dogs?
About 10 years.
Who is your favorite TV trainer?
Matt Beisner, because I'm good friends with Matt. Matt Beisner from Dog Impossible. Yeah.
There you go. All right. What is your biggest concern when taking on a new aggression client?
Not getting my face bitten off.
Are you ever scared of your dog training clients?
No, because I make sure I put everything safely in place before I start working with them. Really important part of the job.
What's the worst bite you've ever sustained, if any?
I was bitten by a German Shepherd about 7 years ago, right on the leg. Got me on the thigh. Wouldn't let go. Had to ask him politely to kind of release my leg. And he did. So thank you to that German Shepherd. That was a while ago, 7 years ago. I've only been bitten 3 times in my entire career, fortunately. Knock on wood.
That's pretty good because I was a pet sitter for 7 years full time. Then I was managing the business. And I think I got bit 3 times in that time. So you are obviously doing something right because you're working with aggressive dogs and you've only had 3 bites.
Yeah, I like my body parts, so I try to stay safe.
Yes, you're smart. You go about it the right way. All right. Have you had aggressive dogs yourself?
I've fostered a lot of aggressive dogs, and I have owned one tiny little terror. And yes, so the answer is yes. And those are the dogs that gave me a lot of experiences. One of the best ways to learn is to have an aggressive dog in your home and to deal with all the management and having people come over and your own dogs and your kids. And yeah, it's an adventure.
My goodness. It definitely takes a special person. I don't think that I would specialize in aggressive dogs. I think I'd be too scared. So good for you for making that your purpose and your mission. Okay, so this one's very, very simple to answer in one word or two. I'm lying. It's really not. Is aggression genetic?
Sometimes.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, it's most of the time it's learned behavior, but it can be genetic because we've asked many different breeds to do different aggressive behaviors as part of their work. So if you look at livestock guarding dogs or protection dogs or guarding dogs, definitely it's part of their genetic tendencies. But it's always the individual dog, of course. But of course, if we're breeding for that, we sometimes will see it come out, just like we see a border collie herding sheep if we've been breeding border collies to do that.
Right. Okay, so percentage-wise, how many dogs, pet dogs in the U.S. are aggressive or can be labeled aggressive? Is there a percentage out there?
That's a great question. I think it's unfortunately increasing over the last couple of years, especially during the pandemic. But, I wish I could give a definitive number to that, which I can't. I think all dogs have the potential to display aggressive behavior if you push them enough, because it's normal behavior. It's normal behavior if we push any animal, including humans, to do something, or if we threaten them enough, you're going to respond aggressively at some point, right? Somebody's threatening your kids. What are you going to do? You're probably going to pull out Mama Bear and be aggressive towards whoever's threatening your kids. And dogs are very much the same. Aggression is normal behavior. So really, we could increase the percentage if we start doing awful things to dogs, which of course I'm not recommending, but it's important to understand, aggression is normal behavior for any species to protect themselves, self-preservation or preservation of someone they love or they're attached to or something that they feel is of value, like a resource.
Nice. Okay. That makes perfect sense. That's great. Okay. So are you drawn to aggressive dogs? Like, are you out and about and you just kind of have like this like affinity with aggressive dogs? Have you found that?
Unfortunately, yes. I think you start to notice those things, when you specialize in something, you start to see it all the time and you kind of cringe when people are doing things on social media or you see somebody out on the street and doing things. You're like, ooh, that could result in a bite. Most of the time it doesn't, but yeah, you start to notice those things. And so you're kind of drawn to it without necessarily intending to be drawn to it at times. And I'm sure many of the trainers that are listening in are probably thinking the same thing. Yeah, you start to see it when you don't necessarily want to see it all the time.
Have you found that any pet parents are drawn to aggressive dogs? Like they kind of end up getting aggressive dogs over and over and over again?
In some circumstances, yeah, I think it's just like some people like to adopt the senior dogs and take care of them in their old age. And some people, are drawn to more sport dogs. And I do find a small segment of people are kind of like the aggression cases, but that's a very small percentage because most of the time it's if you've lived with one, the last thing you want to do is have another one like that.
Yes. True that. Okay, last question. Are all pet parents equally equipped to manage aggressive dogs?
No, unfortunately not. But it's nobody's fault. It's really circumstances, what you're going through in your own life, your own culture, your resources, your family. You could have 4 or 5 kids, then they might not be listening to all the things you have to do to close the baby gates or shut the door, or do the things you have to do. So it really is, again, I never blame anybody for necessarily poor management. It's just circumstantial, right?
For sure. Yeah, aggression is very multifaceted, I'm sure, which is why it's so fascinating that you're an expert in that specialty, because it doesn't seem like the most fun way to go to work with dogs. So why did you choose aggression as your specialty?
I think, it's not fun most of the time to have, I always joke that I can go weeks sometimes in my cases without ever petting a dog. And a lot of us get into training because we want to hang out with dogs and have fun with dogs. And, people think trainers like, oh, you play with puppies all day, but that is not the case, unfortunately. I'm drawn to the reward of helping dogs and the families that they're in. So a lot of these owners are struggling and the dogs are struggling. They're misunderstood. They're experiencing all kinds of, negative events in their life that's resulting in the aggressive behavior. And if I can help the dogs, that's the aspect of it that draws me to it. That's kind of how I got started in it, with all the foster dogs that needed help and being able to help them stay out of shelters and rescues and all of those situations they got themselves in the first place because of their aggressive behavior, and being able to help them stay in their homes or find new homes. That's the part that really is rewarding. So yes, I love to pet dogs and hang out with dogs, but I also like to help them make sure they stay out of those predicaments in the first place, or to change up their routine and their environment so that they can be successful moving forward.
Absolutely. I mean, for those families, you are the most valuable dog trainer on the planet, because only a specialist in aggression can really bring peace to their home.
I appreciate that. But there are plenty of other wonderful trainers and veterinary behaviorists and other animal professionals all around the world that are doing great work. So everybody listening in that is helping dogs with aggression, thank you for the work you do, because it's very much needed right now.
Absolutely. It's such an important thing to do. I mean, I can't imagine. I had an aggressive dog. She passed away last year, and I had a young child, and it was so stressful. She was older though, and we kind of managed it. We ended up muzzling her, which I'll talk about that in the second part of the show. But I can't imagine having just adopted her and having children and looking forward 12 years and saying, I have to deal with this for 12 years. I don't know how people manage that without an expert like you. All right. So speaking of experts, you have an acronym CDBC behind your name. What does that mean?
That's a certified dog behavior consultant from the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants.
And you were president of that organization for 5 years. And you're also a member of the Association of Professional Dog Trainers, APDT. So how are they similar, those two organizations?
They're very much like sister organizations. APDT has a much larger member base because they also focus on dog trainers working in different formats like group classes and obedience trials and those kind of things. Whereas the IWBC focuses on behavior consulting, so problem behaviors in dogs, cats, parrots, horses, and working animals, and shelter division now as well. So they are mostly focused on when things are going sort of off with the dogs or the cats or the other animals. Whereas APDT also does that, but they are more focused kind of on the big umbrella of dog trainers.
Dogs specifically. Okay. All right. So I have to take a break, but I want to talk more about, like I said, muzzling. But we need to take a break, listen to our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. So sit tight.
Take a bite out of your competition. Advertise your business with an ad in Pet Life Radio podcasts and radio shows.
There is no other pet-related media that is as large and reaches more pet parents and pet lovers than Pet Life Radio. With over 7 million monthly listeners, Pet Life Radio podcasts are available on all major podcast platforms, and our live radio stream goes out to over 250 million subscribers on iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn, Stitcher, and other streaming apps. For more information on how you can advertise on the #1 pet podcast and radio network, visit PetLifeRadio.com/advertise today.
Let's talk pets
Let's talk pets
on Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back to Covered in Pet Hair. I'm your host, Isabel Alvarez-Arada, and today I have the pleasure of speaking to Michael Shikashio, who is an expert in canine aggression, who loves to help families find peace with their dogs and manage their situations, which can be completely daunting. And I've been binging your channel, your interviews all week in preparation for our talk, Michael. And I saw a lot of references to muzzling. And muzzling is something that you do a lot, that you encourage people to consider for the bitey end of the dog that you deal with all the time. So I want to play a second game with you. And this is called Muzzle Time, because I want to give you some myths and some truths about muzzling, which I may or may not have learned from you. And I want you to tell me if these are myths, if they're truths, and you can elaborate if you'd like, because this is all about you sharing your expertise on muzzles with us. So are you ready to play?
Ready to go.
All right. All muzzles are created equal.
Myth. And because there's lots of different types of muzzles, depending on the three things I'm looking at are comfort for the dog, safety for whoever the dog's trying to bite, and being able to feed treats or food through the muzzle. Those are the three things I look for. So depending on the muzzle you're looking for, you kind of weigh those criteria before you buy it.
Perfect. Some dogs need custom-made muzzles due to size or snout type.
True. Some dogs with a flat face, the brachycephalic breeds, they don't have a lot of real estate on their muzzle, so they can't have much resting on there. So custom muzzles will be able to take care of them. And there's a couple of great companies, Buma's and Trust Your Dog. They make custom biofilm muzzles if you're looking for that. And there's a few other companies that have lots of different sizes to choose from. So when in doubt, you can always get a fit for your dog. And that's important. You want to make sure it's a comfortable, secure, safe fit.
Yes. Okay. So my next myth or truth is, when ordering muzzles online, it might be smart to get a few in a few different sizes and test them out, because it's going to be a process. Chances are it's not going to fit like a Cinderella slipper on the first try.
True. Just like a pair of jeans you'd order online, you kind of want to order a few different pairs. Now, jeans aren't quite as a necessary thing for safety as muzzles are, and their muzzles are a lot cheaper most of the time than a pair of designer jeans. So yeah, it's easier just to order a few different kinds, see which ones fit, and send the others back if that's possible to do so. Most companies are just fine with doing that. So yeah, I always recommend that, because then you don't have to send that one back, wait for the other one to get there, because you want to be acclimating the muzzle in the meantime, getting the dog comfortable wearing it. And so yeah, I always say get a couple different kinds. But for the trainers listening in, make sure you're bringing a few different kinds. That way, if you're going in person, that way the client can try a few different sizes to see what fits, and then you can maybe even sell them that muzzle if that's what you're doing. So
awesome. Yeah. Yes, revenue stream. I love it. Okay, so dogs hate wearing muzzles.
Sometimes. So it's a true/false answer depending on how you acclimate it. Muzzles should be just like anything else that a dog loves to wear. Like they see their harness come out, they come running over because they love going for that walk. And some dogs will see the harness come out and they go running because they got scared by the harness one time, or maybe pinched their skin, one of the clips maybe just caught their skin or something like that. So muzzles are no different. We want to make sure that they're really comfortable wearing them and taking our time, slowly acclimating the muzzle, pairing it with food. Tons of great videos out there on YouTube to learn how to do that, but take your time. There's most of the time no rush to get that muzzle on the dog. You have a couple weeks often just to take your time each day, baby steps, get the dog to really love that muzzle, and that's going to save you so much trouble in the future, because if the dog hates the muzzle, it's going to be really difficult to do any training with them when that muzzle's on.
Yes. So you want to sweeten them up at the beginning, not like shock them and then try to sweeten them up after they're like,
exactly.
I don't like that. Get away from me. All right. So muzzles are aversive/punishment based.
False. Muzzles are a management and safety tool. They're not really used for training. And if you're using them for training in the sense of trying to suppress behavior, you're doing it wrong because we don't want to suppress the behavior. The reason why is, like, you can put a muzzle on a dog and they'll be like, oh, some dogs, not all dogs, but some will be like, oh, woe is me. This is awful. I'm not going to do anything. So I'll just sulk and sit here. And a lot of people think, oh, this dog's well behaved now, air quotes, well behaved, because the dog's just standing there like, I hate my life because my muzzle's on. And they're not going to move or they get shut down. And what that looks is like the dog is behaved, meaning, again, air quotes. So the client or the trainer, whoever's looking at the dog, like, okay, this is fixed. So the dog's great now. Uncle Bob comes in the front door, says hello to the dog. Dog's got the muzzle on. Dog doesn't try to bite Uncle Bob. But then the muzzle comes off and the dog's like, woohoo, the muzzle's off. Now game is on. Where's Uncle Bob? Because I'm going to bite his face off. Because the behavior is no longer suppressed by the muzzle. So it's really important again, that acclimation route is so important because it's very easily can mask the behavior or suppress the behavior if it's used as a punishment or a aversive tool like that. So you got to be really careful.
So you just said it's not a training tool, it's a safety tool that is used while you're training.
Yes, it is very much, yes. Just use like a leash or a harness or a baby gate or a front door to your house. They're all management tools to keep the dog from going from point A to biting.
Right. Very cool. Okay. Muzzles are only used for aggression.
False. So you have dogs that like to eat stuff off the ground. They like to pick up glass bottles or dangerous things. Who knows what's on walks, a dead carcass or something like that. And we want to prevent them from doing that and getting sick or eating rocks. Some dogs do that. And we want to keep them from injuring themselves. So muzzles can be great for that. Sometimes you don't know if the dog could be potentially a biter later on in life. Some dogs get injured, you have an emergency, the dog gets injured. And when a dog is in pain, we never can know exactly what the behavior is going to look like because they're in pain. And again, it's normal behavior for a dog or a human to lash out at somebody touching their painful spot.
Right.
And so if a dog has been acclimated already to a muzzle, it's so much less stressful if they're like, oh, there's just that muzzle thing, and rather versus, oh, I just hurt myself and I've got to get this weird thing put on my face. So it's going to be super stressful for that dog. So you never know when emergencies can happen. So there's lots of benefits to using muzzle. Or let's say you have a dog you don't know how they are with people or other dogs. You have zero history. Let's say we just rescued a dog and dog seems good with people, for instance, but then we bring it home. We've got our other dog in the home and we're worried and we want to introduce them, but they're giving little signals, but we're still not 100% sure. So they're not like barking, lunging, and growling at each other, but they're just kind of like, oh, you're there, I'm here. Okay. What's your deal? And then we want to get them together, but we want to do it safely. So we acclimate the new dog to a muzzle over time. And then after a week or two of settling into the new home, then we introduce the dogs with the muzzle that the dog's like totally fine wearing. And then introduce the dogs just for safety. And if they get along, great. No need for the muzzle. But it's that safety layer to protect your current dog or dogs. And it can be very, very useful for that aspect as well. So not just for dogs that have already been
there, done that. I had 2 female dogs that we acclimated together and they were all great and fine. And then month 2, they went at it over my husband. They were resource guarding my husband and it came out of nowhere. And this was one of the dogs is the dog that I waited way too long to muzzle. So yes, definitely when introducing new dogs, that's a good skill to have. Last question, training a dog to accept a muzzle takes forever.
Sometimes.
Okay.
It depends on the history. Most of the time, it's a very quick process. Within 2 weeks, most dogs are going to be fine. Some dogs I've had within 2 minutes be completely fine with the muzzle. It all depends on the dog. Just like people are getting used to a new pair of shoes or something that they're breaking in. Some people can just throw on a new pair of shoes and they're off and running because they have no issues. Look at my girlfriend, Moira. She's like, can throw on any pair. She wears like those shoes that have no padding at all. Like she wants to be like one of those barefoot, like,
yes.
Cave women that just runs around. I'm the total opposite. I need like cushion. I need to be like walking on the moon with like pillows under my feet because I cannot get used to like hard shoes. It takes me a long time. So each dog is going to be different. It could take a long time. Most dogs, generally within 2 weeks, you're going to be fine. However, again, if you go with that, just slapping a muzzle on a dog, guess what's going to happen? They're going to like, I hate this thing. And then if you try to go back to taking the nice slow route, the acclimation route, that dog's like, this is horrible. I remember that. This thing is horrible. So it's going to actually take you much longer in those cases. So it's always, always better to just take your time, learn how to do it correctly, and avoid so many problems later on.
I love that. That's so true. We actually, when we finally muzzled socks way too late in life. We used pouches and we had little kids. So we had pouches and the pouches through the muzzle. She was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Because she would see the kids eating it. Now she's about to eat it. And she's like, I don't have to steal this. You're just feeding it to me. Okay.
Isn't classical conditioning so wonderful?
It is. She's like, muzzle, pouch. Yes. All right. So you work with mostly with families that have aggressive dogs. So when you say like, let's muzzle your dog, do you find that because of their situation, they're more accepting of a muzzle than maybe the general population?
It depends on it's another it depends question. I think it really depends on the client and their perception of muzzles. There's a lot of misconceptions, as we were just going through all the myths and the truths about muzzles, and a lot of clients have their own perceptions about it. And a lot of them like, oh, I don't know, that's like awful. Isn't that mean? Doesn't that like hold their mouth shut? Or doesn't it? They're going to look like Hannibal Lecter. Nobody's going to want to talk to my dog. And so there's a lot of stigmas around the muzzle. And so sometimes I get that. But my argument always is that, or the way I convince them, is that it's way cheaper to buy a muzzle than it is to settle a dog bite lawsuit.
1,000.
Especially in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It's that the average dog bite lawsuit it multiplies every single year I look at it in terms of they release the statistics the insurance agencies do in terms of the average dog bite litigation lawsuit. It was like 18,000 like 5 years ago. It's up to like multiple, much more than that now. And when you look at it, that's the average dog bite lawsuit. And the thing is, most dog bites, the attorneys jump all over them because it's so easy. It's like it's always the dog's fault, basically.
Right.
And when it comes to the legal stuff, and so at least most of the time, and so it's just so much cheaper to get the muzzle to avoid those issues, and you avoid getting your dog into trouble, like doggy jail or quarantine or animal control, getting involved and issuing orders that you might not agree with, and so it's much safer and just again. So many benefits. And when I start talking about those things, most clients are totally on board. I would say 99% of the clients I've had that I've talked about muzzle, I've been able to convince one way or another. So I've kind of I've developed these scripts over time to help convince clients like why a muzzle is so important.
That's so funny because I come from a super risk-averse family. So the second a dog even shows a little snarl, they're like, what can we do to prevent anything worse? But it's funny to me that somebody going to an aggression expert for a dog that may already have a bite history has any kind of hesitation. I would be like, teach me how, where is it? Which one do I buy? Tell me everything. I'm getting it right now. But everybody, like you said, is different.
Yeah, most of my clients are like that. They're like, just show me what to do because I this is not safe. We can't live with this anymore. But you get, sometimes, and it's understandable because again, we're just a product of the stigmas that we hear about things, right? And so you just have to dispel those bits. And most of the time, people are like, oh, that totally makes sense.
Yes.
Right? I don't want to get sued. I don't want my dog to end up in doggy jail. It all works out.
You don't want your kid or your grandkid or your friend's kid or your dog or whomever to end up being the next bite that really convinces you that a muzzle is necessary or causes all that trouble. So on the other side of the token, should muzzling be something like crate training where it's a skill we teach all dogs at some point in their lives?
It would be nice because, again, you never know when a dog's going to need a muzzle. Most of the time, the vast majority of dogs, they're not going to bite. The dogs put up with a lot from us humans, right? So they don't bite miraculously most of the time, but you never know. And it's just a good idea to have that, just like crate training. You never know. Most dogs may never need a crate. And there's some countries, they don't even use crates. However, there's emergencies. You never know. Veterinary visit, for instance, that they have to stay overnight. Maybe they have to stay in a crate or an emergency, or you have to transport your dog, or you're evacuated from a certain area, or you decide to go into dog sports and do dog trials and you have to crate your dog. All those things are really beneficial. So I wish we would move away from sit down, stay, come, heel to let's teach the dogs how to love vet visits. Let's teach them how to wear a muzzle for emergencies. Let's teach them to socialize well with people and other dogs and not worry about sit down, stay, come, heel all the time, right?
Yes, teach them skills that actually help them in life. We're doing that with kids now too, right? We're doing that more so with children where we're like, let's teach them how to process their emotions rather than teach them how to execute directions that, they may not be comfortable with or not know why they're doing them. So I agree. Let's do that for everybody. Let's teach them skills that'll help them in the long run. So what dogs should not be muzzled? Is there, with everything, exceptions to, who it's best for?
I think it's more what situations versus what dogs. There's plenty of dogs that don't need to be muzzled, even the ones that have a significant history of aggression, even high-level bite histories, they don't need to be muzzled in their home if they've never bitten their owner. And so it's situational. Certainly if Uncle Bob comes over and Uncle Bob's been bitten before, we're going to need that muzzle most of the time. So we're going to, it's situational, I think, is more a way to think about it. And that's really important because sometimes my clients forget, okay, this is a situation in which my dog might feel threatened or uncomfortable, but maybe I can't avoid it as much as I'd like to. Maybe it is a vet visit. Maybe I'm living in the city and I can't get that much distance from people walking by. So it's always situational. And that's really the more important aspect because, each dog is going to be different, right?
Yep. That reminds me of why I muzzled my dog Socks is because I needed her to go for walks with a dog walker. She had had a bite incident with a dog walker, not the dog walker. She bit somebody else. The dog walker got too close. He had been told not to get too close. The mailman was there. That's her trigger. She got all out of control, bit somebody. Luckily, it was a tiny bite and we did not get sued for $1 million. Thank goodness. We were scared that it might happen because we hadn't seen what she caused. It was minor, but I wanted to get a dog walker here in El Paso and I wasn't comfortable after that experience. And I was like, I'm not going to let a dog walker walk her. If a dog walker doesn't remember or, gets tied up in a situation again where there's a trigger and something, I don't want them to feel terrible. I don't want there to be drama. I don't want somebody to get hurt. So I started muzzle training her for that. And it was so nice to be able to be like, okay, the dog walker was doing all the things that acclimated her to, like we continued that long-term, like positive reinforcement training whenever she was wearing the muzzle. He was great about it. I was comfortable at home knowing that I was with my newborn baby and my dog was walking and not going to hurt anybody. So yeah, that was kind of like the motivation. It was very situation specific and it made such a world of difference.
If you think about it too, it's again, at the general public, we often trust our professionals. If somebody's got a title like dog pro, whatever title it is, we're like, okay, they've got this handled. But that doesn't mean, so they can be the best dog handler in the world, but that doesn't prevent the other people from doing things, right?
Correct.
So it's like, you could say, all right, I've got Mario Andretti or somebody like really like that knows how to drive a car. And then, okay, you're going to drive my kids to school. So you're Mario Andretti. So the kids don't need seatbelts. Would you do that?
No.
Right? Because it's not, he's probably going to get you the kids to school pretty safely, but you can't trust the other drivers.
Right.
So kids are still going to need seatbelts, regardless of who's handling the wheel, right? So same with the dogs,
You're like the king of analogies. I love it. I love your analogies.
That's how I convince a lot of my clients.
Yes, no, it's so important to put things in terms that people can really understand. Like, yeah, I don't care who's driving my kids. They're going in their car seats. They're wearing their seatbelts. It's so true. And yes, my dog trainer felt horrible that the situation happened. And he knew, like, while he was in it, that he had put himself in a bad situation. And you're right. It was the other person who approached when he was saying, please don't approach. He's trying to get her back. The mailman's coming. The dog's completely out of sorts with a stranger, the mailman, all that. And there was nothing he could do. So there was no hard feelings, but it definitely taught me a lesson. So, and nobody wants to learn the lesson the hard way. I had to, but like anybody watching this, if your dog has reactivity on leash, definitely consider talking to somebody, watching Michael's videos, educating yourself on muzzling. There's a ton of stuff online, thank goodness, because I don't wait too long like I did. I really have. That's my biggest regret with Socks, is that I waited too long to muzzle her.
No fault of yours, I'm sure, because you sound just like most of my clients in that, nobody knows when it's coming. Nobody knows. There's no, I never blame my clients because 99.999% of the time they are not doing anything purposely or intentionally, right? It comes when it comes. It's like everything else in life when you don't know it's broken until it actually breaks.
Right. So you have an aggression in dogs master course. So tell me about that. Is that for for dog trainers? Is that for pet parents? Who's that meant for, and what does it entail?
Yeah, thanks. That actually was designed originally for professionals, so dog trainers, veterinarians, anybody working with aggression cases. But I found quite a few requests coming in from pet parents that were looking for something to help their dogs. So at first I was like, yeah, it might be a little bit, some of the language in the course might be a little bit not what you're used to hearing, in terms of the scientific terms. But they're like, that's okay. We just want to learn. And they take the course and they love it because they can actually learn a lot. And it's interesting because they see it from the trainer perspective. So I'm talking like to trainers, so they get to hear like what it sounds like when, you're kind of like listening to the trainers talk to each other. And so they actually love that aspect of it. So now I just, anybody who's interested can take it. Anybody who wants to help their own dog or learn more about working with aggression in dogs can take it. And it's all on demand, and anybody can join at any time. And then they can join mentor sessions with me after they complete the course.
That is so cool. So what kind of tools do you use in aggression cases? What is like your toolbox?
So great question. Obviously I focus on positive reinforcement based methods. And if you start looking at the technical terms, I focus on using desensitization and counter conditioning and differential reinforcement strategies, which is just a fancy term for what do we want the dog to do instead of biting Uncle Bob's face off. And so like different behaviors that we can reinforce other than. So it's in the most simplistic terms, but I go into all of the other types of approaches that are out there, whether it's using straight desensitization, addressing the underlying emotional aspects, looking at the medical issues. So there's many, many layers to it, but the foundational aspects starts with that, and then we adjust accordingly depending on the case. Because most aggression cases are going to do quite well with desensitization and counter conditioning because the underlying association is a negative association or it's fear based. It's the other types of cases, a dog that's maybe not fearful, that we have to adjust our behavior plans, but most of the time you're going to be safe with just a straightforward desensitization and counter conditioning approach and a differential reinforcement strategy layered in there, which is again changing how the dog feels about Uncle Bob coming in and asking the dog to do something else when Uncle Bob comes in. That's the most simple way to put it.
I love it. I love it. So I had a consultation with a dog trainer ages ago, a very good one. Her name is Peggy, and I don't know if she still runs it. She may be retired now, but she was with Sun Dogs in Northern Virginia. And she told me in our conversation about my two females that fought at home, she told me that dogs don't want to bite. Dogs don't want to fight, that it's too much of a risk that they really don't want to take. And they only take that risk when they feel like they don't have another choice. Would you agree with that?
Most of that.
Yeah?
Yes, the vast majority of dogs, it's very expensive behavior.
Right.
From an ethological perspective, from an ethological perspective, it is not good for an animal out anywhere to exhibit aggressive behavior or engage in overt aggressive behavior because they risk injury to themselves.
Right.
From an evolutionary standpoint, it's actually not very efficient to do that. So the vast majority of dogs, they just want to give the least amount of effort or overt behavior towards making something scary or threatening go away. And if they accomplish the task with a growl, great. But sometimes they have to escalate to biting because the growl wasn't working before. So that's the vast majority of dogs. However, there is a small percentage of dogs, they are going to use aggression for sport where they're having fun doing it because that is what we've asked them to do for many generations. As humans, we've asked them to guard property or asked them to fight each other, sadly, or asked them to fight, bulls in the ring and all these things that unfortunately humans have asked dogs to do over the years. So those are the small percentage of dogs. I want to stress that. It's a very small percentage of dogs that are actually going to engage in the sport or the fun of it. And you can usually tell right away. And the treatment plan is a little bit different. So how we address that, it's much more the differential reinforcement side of things, where we're asking the dog to do other things because we're not trying to change an underlying emotion there, where they're having a good time, so to speak. And so we're often not trying to change their association. We're just trying to teach them other things to have fun or that are reinforcing for them. So again, small percentage of cases, I don't want anybody to think like, oh my gosh, I've got that type of dog. It is not common at all. And in the case, like for instance, your dogs you were just talking about there, it sounds like just typical competition over something of value, your husband. So that can happen, and it happens often in my cases.
Yes. Resource guarding is really a big deal, and it's pretty common. So it's something that probably gets ignored until it escalates, and then they come to you.
It's the number one reason for dogs to have conflicts in the home, resource guarding or competition over something they find of value, whether it's food, toys, resting spots, or people.
Yep. Okay, one more question, and then I'm going to get into your conference you just had. But do you find that, and I believe science may have answered this in a way, I just noticed that my kids messed with my covered in pet hair. Did you see this? This whole time
it still does the job.
Covered in pet hair.
It still does the job.
It does the job. I just realized looking back I have to check my set more often. Okay, but this is actually a very important question. Do you find that people who have worked with aversives and punishment-based training encourage aggression?
That's a really interesting question. I don't think anybody in the dog training world, most people don't get into this to make things worse, right, for the
Right.
dogs. So yes, there's, so let's differentiate that. There's some trainers, of course, working to train dogs for protection or to display aggressive behavior. So police dog trainers, Schutzhund, French Ring, Mondial, those kind of sports, or actually true protection of estates or livestock or people, whatever it is. So they've got that actual, which is fine. I mean, they're doing that for a particular task or set of tasks for those particular dogs. Now, that being said, I don't think anybody's really getting into it using aversive, saying, I want the dog to be more aggressive, because that would
Right.
actually be the antithesis to what they're trying to do, is trying to
Of course.
help the dog. But that being said, the issue with, of course, with punishers is that you have the risk of potential fallout or side effects where you're not really addressing the underlying emotion or motivation, and emotions drive behavior. So if we don't address that, we're not going to necessarily address what's fueling that, right? It's all that gas and that engine that is fueling the aggressive behavior. We can put the brakes on and we're going to stop the behavior for a moment using an aversive or a punisher, but that engine and that gas is still running, and eventually those brakes are going to give way and somebody's going to get bitten. So yeah, it's and again, no fault of any. I'm not blaming anybody or criticizing anybody. I'm a crossover trainer myself. I used to use punishers and aversives. I'm very familiar with all the different tools to do that, and it works on paper or at face value at first, and then you start seeing enough cases where, okay, it works until it doesn't, and then the dog resorts back to it because I haven't addressed how that dog feels about Uncle Bob coming in the home. I want that dog to really look forward to Uncle Bob coming in the home, rather than I'm just going to be punished for growling at Uncle Bob, but I still hate Uncle Bob.
Right.
So,
well, does it inevitably make it worse, or could it make it worse?
Using aversives?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yep. Because what can happen is the opposite of what, let's say we've got Uncle Bob coming in and throwing treats at the dog. Sometimes, a lot of times, the dog's going to be like, this guy's not so bad after all, because every time Uncle Bob shows up, I'm getting steak. All right, come on in, Uncle Bob. You're okay with the family. So you get that association built. But what if the opposite happens? Every time Uncle Bob comes in, somebody is punishing the dog, whether it's, correcting the dog on a collar or throwing something at the dog, or whatever method is used to suppress the growling and lunging at scary Uncle Bob. The dog's gonna be like, okay, I won't growl or lunge because I'm gonna get punished for it. But how's the dog feeling about Uncle Bob? Uncle Bob's gonna be like, every time Uncle Bob comes over, something bad happens to me. I'm gonna get something thrown at me, or something scary is gonna happen. So we're doing the exact opposite of what we're trying to do, is trying to make the dog feel better about Uncle Bob. So that's why that's the risk of it. It can work, sure. You can get a dog to stop doing anything if you have the right aversive. You just won't be addressing the underlying emotion, and sometimes you're going to make it worse.
That's a scary part of it, where you think it's working and then you see that it failed you entirely. So you just finished up your Aggression in Dogs conference, and you did it virtually this year, correct?
Yes, we were in Chicago.
How many years have you done this conference?
That was the second year, and we're doing a third year in Providence, Rhode Island next year. It's going to be in person and live streaming. So I'm excited to get people back in person, because that's where the magic happens at those dog training conferences. You get to connect and meet and just, talk to people. And it's so much better than the online aspect. Not that the online was bad, but it'd be great to see people in person again.
Yes, that's actually what fueled this show. Is I missed my conferences and my colleagues, and I wanted to have a drink with people that wanted to talk pets. So this is where I got the idea. So yeah, I totally agree. I missed the in-person conferences. So what were the highlights this year for you?
Oh, the connection between the speakers. We did our best to connect with the audience. So we had a really great chat box, and we had options for people to ask questions and things like that. But I never planned this. Like I just started making a list of the speakers and trying to, connecting with people to get them to come to the conference and talk in Chicago during a pandemic, which was a hurdle on its own. But we've had, 11 great speakers, 12 actually, come out, and the connection was just magical. So, because everybody started talking about the same thing, and the theme this year was choice and control and agency and empathy and kindness and all the things that we really need during a pandemic to really shift our moods and get us thinking again about what's happening up here, and rather than focusing on just behavior all the time. So we're really looking at emotions, and that was just the magical part about it, because everybody was just connecting so well, and everybody was talking about the same thing in all the talks. Nobody was like, oh, all right, so we're going to talk about this. Like literally everybody was just talk after talk was just talking about kindness and empathy and connecting with our clients and connecting with the dogs in a much more deeper level than just looking at behavior. So yeah, that was the highlight for sure.
That is awesome. That's actually something I talked about with Dr. Pockle, that I love that we're looking deeper into the psyches of our dogs, more than just what can they do for us? Do they have a bellyache? But like, how do they feel? And I have another show coming up where I interviewed a dog trainer who specializes in canine mental health, which is a term she coined. And her name is Jenna, and she's wonderful. So look out for that one if you are looking to learn more about canine mental health and emotional well-being. So tell us how our audience can learn more about you, Mike, if they haven't heard about you, which I'm sure so many of our viewers have. So how do they find out more about you and your programs?
I appreciate that. Yeah, the easiest way to remember is aggressivedog.com. I mean, what else could you ask for in a domain name that I bought like many, many years ago, and I finally actually got it up and running a few years back. But yeah, everything I do there is there. So they can find the podcast, the conference, all the courses and webinars and everything else that's happening. There's great articles I have some guest bloggers coming in to write about aggression in dogs. So it's going to be like, I'm hoping to be like the hub for helping dogs with aggression around the world. So not just the US, I'm going global with everything and trying to help as many dogs as I can that have aggression issues using humane, positive-based methods, and hopefully it just continues to spread. And that's my goal with it. So aggressivedog.com. Easy to remember.
That is awesome. I would love to have you back to talk about dogs and culture and how that varies one day if you're up for it.
Stay tuned. I've got some exciting things in the works for that particular topic. So
it's fascinating, truly, because we have to change the perspective of a lot of cultures before we can really change the outcomes for the dogs there, right?
Absolutely. Yes. There's a lot of things that we can learn from each other. That's
true. Very much so. Well, I just want to propose a toast to you for all of the wonderful work you do for all of those aggressive dogs and families dealing with that. Here's to you. Cheers. Thanks for being a guest on my show.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Cheers. I also want to propose a toast to our executive producer, Mark Winter, for making this show possible, and to our viewers on YouTube and our listeners on Pet Life Radio. Thank you for spending your time with us. Here's to a life covered in pet hair, because there's no better way to live. Cheers. To learn more about Covered in Pet Hair, please visit coveredinpethair.com or petliferadio.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Let's Talk Pets, every week on demand, only on PetLifeRadio.com.